This video is on the objective make a conclusion and interpret the results of a hypothesis test for a proportion using the critical value / rejection region approach, just referred to as the critical value approach pretty often. And this is number 1, right? The first video on a question in your homework related to this objective. So let's take a look at it. So again, if you're unfamiliar with the topic, want to see more about it, please click on More Instruction. Look at their videos, their notes, their examples, and hopefully those help you. Alright, so here, a school psychologist would like to investigate whether an aptitude test includes less than 25% questions that are related to cultural sensitivity. So based on the following results, conclude whether to reject or not reject the null hypothesis. Alright, so see what they're testing here is, whether or not the percentage of questions on this test that include cultural sensitivity is less than 25%. So P is less than 0.25 is the claim they're testing. And you see that that's the alternative hypothesis here. P is less than 0.25. Then the null hypothesis would be P is greater than or equal to 0.25, but we're just assuming the equal part. All right. So we're going to be assuming that there is 25% of questions that relate to cultural sensitivity on this test. The significance level is 1%, right, 0.01. They already calculated a test statistic and gave it to us. Remember, this is a z-score, negative 1.30. And this would be a left-tailed test. Right? Look at the alternative hypothesis is that P is less than a number. So it's a left-tailed test. And what they did, I'll bring this up on some paper here, is if you look at Z, right, look at the standard normal distribution. Right, so our horizontal axis here is Z scores. It's bell-shaped, symmetrical. Right? The z-score underneath the peak of the standard normal curve is 0. And again, I said this is a left-tailed test. And alpha they gave us was 1%. So we'd be looking for, what's the z-score that has 1% above it, but then, the opposite of that. So this is minus that z-score with 0.01. Now I can find this value on my calculator. Now they gave it to us, right? They told us it was negative 2.33, right? The critical value. And the area to the left of a z-score of negative 2.33 is 1%. Right? Again, it's only a one-tailed test. I didn't have to cut that in half. Sorry if that's tiny, but the area to the left of negative 2.33 is 1%. Now our test statistic, right, they said came at negative 1.3. Now where is that? Now negative 2.33 is here. Negative 1.3 or negative 1.30, there's our test stat. That is definitely not in the rejection region. It's not beyond this critical value of negative 2.33. So based on this evidence that they gave us, I would say that we're not going to reject the null hypothesis, right? We would fail to reject, do not reject the null hypothesis. Again, the reason for that is our test statistic, right, is not in the rejection region. And that's how we're going to answer. Right? You have to answer two things. I'm failing to reject the null, and the reason for that is because the test statistic is not in the rejection region. So those go hand in hand. You have to answer both. These other two also go hand in hand. Right? If you answer reject the null, that means your test statistic does fall within the rejection region. But we had the fail. Right? And I don't believe there might be another part of this where they ask you to make a conclusion. Yes. Okay. So now, based on the results from the school psychologist's investigation of proportion of questions that are related to cultural sensitivity on the aptitude test, all the stuff above, choose the correct conclusion that interprets the results within the context of the hypothesis test. Now, the claim that was being tested was that there was less than 25% of the questions on this test related to cultural sensitivity. So the claim was the alternative hypothesis. Right? The claim was the alternative hypothesis. What we just said, we're not rejecting the null. You're keeping the null hypothesis, meaning that you're not keeping the alternative. You're supporting the null, but not supporting the alternative. And the alternative was this statement. The alternative was the claim. So we're not supporting the claim. We're not supporting this statement that the aptitude test includes less than 25% questions that are related to cultural sensitivity. And it's because I didn't reject the null. So let's read through these. So the first statement, there is not sufficient evidence or not enough evidence that the proportion of questions related to cultural sensitivity is less than 25%. That's correct. That's exactly what I just said. There is not enough evidence to show that, to support that. Because again, we didn't reject the null. So yeah. You can read the other ones. Again, read through your answer explanations. Make sure you understand why things are correct or why you got something wrong. And maybe you can do better the next time you see a question like that. All right, and that's the end of this question. All right. You make a decision about rejecting or not rejecting the null hypothesis, and then you make a conclusion about the claim. Right? The conclusion, do you support the claim? Does the evidence support the claim or not? Based on your previous decision. All right. So hopefully watching this and looking at the more instruction help you out when you're working on this kind of a problem on your own. And thank you for watching.